So now we're moving on to our next talk, and it's Dr. Nick Baker that's going to come up from Savanta, and he's going to be discussing with us the metaverse and what it means for research. And we'll be exploring the challenges and opportunities when researching in the metaverse about the metaverse. So, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I think what we've just listened to is a perfect kind of precursor to what I wanted to talk through today. I guess the main thing we want to try and convey is quite how important it is that we wrap our heads around this, because this is very, very real, no pun intended, you just have to look at the amount of money that is currently going into this area. Yeah, one of my very good friends. Yeah, this is hot off the press. He happens to be the head of Metaverse for Samsung in Europe, and he sent me something yesterday because I asked him what he was doing. So the top investors, right, currently are Alphabet, BlackRock, Morgan Stanley, Samsung, Goldman Sachs, BNY Mellon, PayPal, Microsoft, Commonwealth Bank, list goes on. But if you look at how many of those are financial services businesses, and you look at the volume of cash that's going into this, yeah, it really starts to concentrate the mind. Also, somebody paid quite recently to live next to Snoop Dogg in the metaverse, and they paid a lot of money for it. Yeah, so one of my old bosses always used to say to me, when you're doing your research and insight work, follow the money. Now, if you follow the money currently, there's a lot of money going into this. So for me, this is vital that we understand this, because our clients are going to need to engage with this. As we've already heard, fashion brands, I mean, Nike and Adidas are currently putting loads of money into Metaverse. The NBA and the NFL are putting a lot of money into the Metaverse now. Now, as this happens, and as a lot of our role is to understand how people behave, how to engage with customers, brands, prospects, this is going to be a really big part of it. And it's from that perspective, really, that I wanted to sort of talk about stuff today. So we were talking just now about, Web 1, 2, 3, where this thing started, 7 layers of the metaverse. Yeah. So, Second Life was 2003. And I actually remember an ASC Conference paper on Second Life, which I have to say was, no disrespect meant, very odd, because it basically said you should think about doing research on something that's not real with people who are definitely not real, who are definitely making up their answers to the questions that you're asking them. Didn't really see a lot of point in that personally, but this is, I think, very different. Yeah, you look at that evolution, and I'm not going to run through all of these things. Yeah, it's kind of crept up on brands, I think, to a large degree. Yeah, because of where we are now. And again, talking to my mate, see, this is how I do stuff at the last minute because it's more useful. He said, in terms of my list of things here, he said, more stuff's happened since then. So what he pointed to was the work around Accenture, for example, what they're doing in the metaverse space. Also, the Samsung's investment in Yuga Labs, which is relatively recent, and there is the launch of Unruly Games 5.1, which basically underpins a lot of the new gaming possibilities as a tech platform. And gaming is one of the places where an enormous amount of money is already being spent by us as consumers. Yeah, so I think the point really around of inflection is really where we stand right now, because there's huge amounts of money going in from the supply side. There are areas like gaming where there is enormous, desire on the demand side. It's what you might call something like the third wave of digital. There you go, TM. Anybody can have that for free. So it's all really about the convergence of the real and the virtual world. Yeah, this is not just about being in a virtual space. It's about being in both of those spaces. It's like analog and digital. One of my other friends, only got about 4, but they set up an ad agency in about 2004, I think it was. It's now, I think, the second largest UK independently owned ad agency. It's called Analog Folk. And the whole point of that agency was that there's a load of stuff that happens in the digital world, but we are, ultimately living in an analog world too. And how can you design experiences that cross through both, basically? What we're now starting to see is that you can actually build experiences that are actually in both and at the same time. So you really see this progression and the sort of the interconnectivity of real and virtual being at the core of that. Why are people getting excited? So here's just a few numbers, basically, to sort of illustrate really the point around investment and interest. Every year 54 billion is being spent on virtual goods. You just have to look. There's a website called CoinDesk which has got lots of very interesting sort of information on this area on it, which if you have a look at that, you'll find some stuff that blows your mind in terms of how much somebody paid to live next to Snoop Dogg and other such things. I think 60 billion messages being sent on Roblox. Now, Roblox, when it was probably one of my first real engagements with the metaverse, which was defined by absolute annoyance and anger at my then 5-year-old son, who would never take his eyes off it and kept asking me how to build something in a program that I'd never heard of, that was really I had no interest in. But the volume of interactions, and if you think about, our roles, he's now 10, amazingly. So, in less than 10 years, he's then going to be adult and all the rest of it. He's been doing this digital native, call it what you will, since he was 5, 4 maybe. This is going to become absolute mainstream, and it's going to be required of brands because of people like my 5-year-old now 10-year-old son, because it is just it's innate to them, maybe not to us, but just as now you've got this sort of pressure from Gen Z, as it were, millennial, whatever labels you wish to give them, to have more ethical, more sustainable businesses, because it becomes a really important factor in their decisions around who to purchase things from. Brands are going to need to be able to deliver in this area in order for future, as it were, adults to want to engage with those brands. You're going to need, it's going to be a prerequisite. And so if we start to look at how do we make sure that we are aware of what's going on, that we understand what those 7 layers of the metaverse are, how they, are relevant to some brands in different ways. Not everybody's going to want to themselves be a creator, but some of these brands, they need to already start to be looking at that, because you can't go from 0 to, 100 overnight. There's a lot of learning in this that brands need to go through, because like with most things, it's a lot easier to get these things wrong than it is to get them right. So a couple of examples now from the real world. I mean, inflation's been an issue, hasn't it, really? But that level of inflation over 6 months is quite impressive. Decentraland, which actually, if you read some stuff, is being not discredited, but it's not quite achieving what people thought it might do, but because it's being overtaken by other things. But you look at that, £913,000 for some digital space to build a digital, shopping district. But it goes to that point around ownership, yeah, not just ownership of your own, imagery, yeah, but owning this land is giving people stakes in a space because they believe that this is definitely coming, and you're seeing it now. I mean, Samsung's just bought a load of space in Metaverse, and if you look at the Bitcoin sort of value as an example, yeah, of how exponential the financial benefit can be in this space, and then you suddenly start to understand why so many investment, management companies are in that list of top businesses here, because there are huge amounts of money already, passing around. As you see, 450 grand to live next to Snoop Dogg, which on that basis of the inflation rate is probably currently about 2 million. So you've got to have a lot of money to. Yeah, probably Snoop Dogg's the only person that live next to Snoop Dogg now. So slight change of tack, really, which is Savanta did some research on the consumer end perspective a little while ago, and I thought I would just share some of this because there are obviously multiple sides to this story, around an imperative for brands to be able to act in this space, an enormous amount of money already being put into it, but a consumer audience that is not hugely well, versed or, understanding of this, unless they have lived their entire lives in it, because it's just what they know because they're 10 years old and they haven't got any money to spend on anything, but they get their parents to try and do it. There is a, as I say, we are at this sort of tipping point, but there is very much growing awareness, of Metaverse. I think it's very often, as we discussed earlier, misunderstood, but that's normal about most things, But what you're starting to see, really, is a growing trend of engagement with it as a thing, and an increase in, as it were, successful attribution of Metaverse as opposed to, social media channels and things like that. And Meta itself is part of that. One of the sort of narratives in this space is that there is a collective, I'll call it, that are determined to ensure that big tech, aka Meta and co, are not in control of this space in the same way that they are in control of the social media world. And I think that's one of the really important things for us as insight professionals to understand if we're talking to our clients about this, because that is a really important, I think, potential cleave in this space. It goes straight to the ethics, the privacy stuff, all of that. So building our understanding of what's happening in this space, for me, is absolutely vital to our ability to really interpret, narratives for clients and to be able to guide them on some of the choices they need to make in terms of their brands and their brand development. So, looking at things like recall, and in particular, it's not a surprise that we're seeing the lowest age sort of bands really having the highest levels of recall, but there are some pretty significant levels of recall, and if you just look at the brand list, Nike, Microsoft, Disney, I mean, what we're seeing here is really a reflection of what we've just listened to, in terms of the fashion, whether it's fashion brands, whether it's technology brands. Definitely the likes, Nike, I think my mate told me, are currently one of the largest. They're the largest brand investor in Metaverse at the moment. And you can buy digital trainers, that are quite expensive. They're quite waterproof if you're in the Metaverse, but they don't work today. So, all of this for me really is shouting very loudly how important it is for us to be able to effectively, guide brands. Me as a recently 48-year-old, male, I am not naturally, of this world, but I do spend a lot of time telling quite a lot of relatively senior clients what they should do in terms of, the forward development of their business and their brands. Now, if I'm blind to this space and what's happening, I'm definitely going to be missing something that's important in the, in that advisory context of what these businesses need to be thinking about. Yeah, it's a sort of slightly odd parallel, but a long time ago, O2, which came together from about 3 different mobile companies and took 10 years to get a billing system that actually was a singular one. That was the key step for it to be able to actually change the way it manages its customers, have a overall platform that they could see, relate research data to their transactional data, and then do way better things in terms of managing at a very granular level customer journeys and stuff. That took 10 years to do that. There are similar trajectories that brands are going to need to go through to be able to really operate successfully in this space, and a lot can happen in 10 years. So there is a real imperative for us to start to develop capability and understanding now, says Grandad here. Just a few examples. I think we've heard some already, but there are Hyundai, Nike, Balenciaga. All of these businesses are already, delivering stores or experiences that exist within Metaverse. Yeah, as I said earlier, go on the CoinDesk website. There's currently a very interesting article. It goes through all the different industries, sort of sectors, and says which of the brands are currently most active and what they're doing. Which I guess is another point, which is there is actually a lot of information that is accessible to us, as insight professionals already there to help us do this. We are not, as it were, helpless in terms of, valid and viable, robust information sources to help get us to a place where we can understand what's going on, even if, like myself, I am certainly not an expert in this. I have a PhD in green politics and potentially anti-authoritarian protest, which has not got a lot to do with technology. And as Bex will attest, I'm pretty shit at technology, aren't I, really? Anyway, for me, it's about understanding what's going on so we can most effectively advise, clients with what they need to do. So a few sort of final factoids there for you in terms of, what we're seeing and the requirement for authenticity. I mean, I think that is a theme that we've seen already develop that then is translating. Again, you see that theme of virtual and real world coming together. Things don't change in terms of requirements around things like authenticity, like we see with sustainability as a comparable issue. You've got the same thing here. Yeah. What should we be doing? Number one, we should be actually getting to know what's going on. Yeah. So, Roblox, the Sandbox, Decentraland, Zepeto, and, are all really important players in this space that probably most of us don't really know very much about. And in order to start to really take those first steps, familiarization. So, understanding what's happening within the where does Bitcoin sit within, the whole crypto space, and what is crypto got, as both forward problems that it's got to address and also players. Ethereum basically is by far the most predominant provider there. And, do we understand that, and what relevance has that got for our client relationships? So a few final sort of really questions that I think we should be considering, basically, because these things are going to become completely vital, I think, for our ability to most effectively, work with our clients. So how would your organisation, your client's business model be impacted? If the volume of time and the volume of people, the exponential rise of time spent in this space is increasing. Yeah, that demand curve on having to be there, starts to absolutely exponentially go up. Which, if you look at technology, has always been the case. Yeah, and we do sit, I think, at that inflection point now. Yeah, what value could your clients create for this community itself? Yeah, and what does that mean? Which community is that? Users, or is that creators? Yeah, or is it both? Yeah, it's all going to depend on what your business is and what you're doing. Yeah, what is an authentic experience within this area? Yeah. What is an authentic experience for your particular, customer base? Yeah, because again, that's going to differ. We talk about whether it's music or, fashion. People are going to be looking for something quite different. Yeah, do your clients actually know, what they're looking for? Most of them, the answer will be no. To be honest with you, what are the opportunities to create new channels, to communicate with your customers, that are transcending, as it were, the real world and going into this virtual world, or in both, obviously. Yeah, and do you have in-house talent that can help you actually do that? Yeah, and some of that's technical, and some of that's more strategic in terms of what does this mean within a whole marketing mix or what have you. Yeah, and how important are young people? Yeah, and how important are they gonna be? Yeah, in 5 years' time? Because if it's going to take you 5 years to really get there and to be more expert as a brand, yeah, well, you don't need to be thinking about 18-year-olds now if that's your target. You need to be thinking about probably people that are like my son who's 10, near 11. Yeah, and that really does change some of the things that you'll want to do in terms of your outward engagement strategy as a business and a brand. Thank you for listening. Like any good researcher, I put some sources in the back. So I think this will get shared afterwards. So I just put them in so that there's a few useful reference points there as well, hopefully.
Thanks, Nick. Right, as with the previous speaker, questions. I've one from Jerome, but I can get to the back. I've got a very long cable. So please don't, and at the front here, Jerome, I'm going to go this way.
Great to see the good doctor in action.
Always lovely to see you, Jerome.
My question is, you use the word, you use recollection to measure the success of brands in the metaverse. That's probably not the best way to measure the success of it. And
no, it's about measuring perceptions of or awareness of, basically. Yeah.
But how are we going to measure the success of brands? In a decentralized world, is this possible? I mean, we measure the success of websites. Yeah. Is it going to be possible to measure things in the metaverse, and how?
It's definitely possible to measure the perceptions of the impact of experience that one may or have had or not within the metaverse, because ultimately we're asking questions in a way we would do now about anything else, whether it was advertising experience or what have you. Yeah, I think that it presents huge challenges for research for the future, but we are not yet at a space where you can actually start to engage within that space in a research context, on the broad scale, quantitative measures. I'm not saying you can't do it at all. That will be required, I think, to actually perfect, measurement within that space. I think where we are now, it's about understanding the relevance and importance of the space and of things within that space for brands as a part of your broader, overall customer, client, prospect engagement strategies. But I think that's going to change, as this grows.
Thanks, Nick. Betty, do you have a question again?
Nick, you just mentioned that it's not quite ready for us researchers potentially to use the metaverse. In your view, how long have we got until researchers, agencies, or research departments within brands can potentially use the metaverse for research and consumer insight?
I think where my point is coming from is more the volume of people that are doing things in that space and the volume of brands that have got things that we would want to measure, and the volume of people that are interacting with them. Now, the highest volume is within a gaming space and things like Roblox, right? But then you get into difficulties there from a research perspective, which are about how parental permission for interviewing and things like that. So, it's not that it's not ready. It's that there are only certain places, where, and I mean, qualitative work is going to be obviously very different to what's required for sort of a broader scale quantitative measurement, which is, obviously both of those things have their place. But I think that what I'm predominantly really focused on is the requirement to be able to look at this within the same context as we would look at, customer experience or brand and things like that on a large-scale quantitative kind of basis. And on that basis, you've got very patchy engagement within, metaverse space, and it's thematic really, around, you could definitely go and do work around certain gaming titles. That wouldn't be a problem, but it's very, very specific.
Hi.
Hiya.
Right now, I guess there are lot of metaverses, and my question is, how do you see that going? I mean, they will merge into one. There will be one that will shine over the other, or they will keep their differences like they are now. Because this is where to beat, kind of.
I think we will. Well, number one, it will definitely change because everything does. Number two, I think you look at nearly any sort of comparable technology development space, first, second, third wave of digital, what you see is multiple players, consolidation, some bigger players, predominating, but then there's always somebody or some people that are trying to creep up on the outside and do something slightly different. I don't see that the general that general trend is going to be any different here. But to be honest with you, my expertise is mostly in doing research and understanding people, as opposed to the absolute what's going to happen with the actual technical development of the metaverse. I mean, I think somebody better qualified to answer that question than myself.
Vic.
Hi, Vic here from IRS. So I'm a fan of...
I have paid my taxes.
I research services. But yeah, I can talk to you about that later, yeah. I'm a big fan of Westworld. Is this a way for us to live forever?
I shan't burst out into song and do a Freddie Mercury impression. I doubt it, because I think she's still going to die, I'm afraid. Sorry to break it to you. I mean, somebody's going to have to be very committed to your continued life within the, within the metaverse to keep that thing going forever, I would have thought. I doubt it. I've never thought about that question, to be honest with you.
Any other questions? Oh, it would be right at the back. Richard, I'll get to you a second. Oh, pardon me. This is going to trip up. You might have to come to me, I'm afraid.
You mentioned some eye-catching figures, like the Snoop Dogg 450,000, 60 billion messages. But I was wondering, especially with a Snoop Dogg example, that kind of money is obviously can't be paid by the common person. And a lot of those figures, they look big and they're eye-catching, but from a personal point of view, it's anecdotal, but I don't see or hear too much about Metaverse in and around me. Not that means a lot, but just wanted to get more of an understanding of.
I think they're being bought as investments, basically.
Pardon?
They're being bought as investments. Yeah. So, there aren't many individuals that can spend 450 quid on a house that doesn't really exist, that they're going to live in, that is next to Snoop Dogg, who doesn't really live there, That, ultimately, there are a lot of these massive amounts of money are being paid by financial services businesses, and because they're seeing this as, real potential for huge return, because they believe in the continuation of this, of the space basically, and its growing importance.
But there was also, you presented the figures about awareness, understanding, and I think I saw that maybe the age groups of 35 to 44 had the highest understanding.
I think the highest understanding is in the lower age groups, to be honest with you.
Which, that's what I was expecting to see. But from just, to go back to the point about Metaverse seemingly being quite niche and even maybe esoteric, so even though there is massive potential, how universal and how relevant is it realistically for that?
I guess that's kind of one of the points here, which is that we are, I think, at an inflection point. And if you look at sort of technology development curves, when it inflects, it go bananas. And I think that's kind of really where we feel we probably are now, or where we're getting to. So the end consumer, citizen awareness, and also the pressures that will bring as it exponentially grows. This could shoot over a 2-3 year period. It could be totally transformed. I could really see that something like that happening. Now, if as a brand you're not even thinking about it, but that has literally gone through the roof, then you've missed a boat. And that's kind of my point, so that the fact that there isn't total awareness, and what there is awareness really around headlines of Metaverse, and certain things within it. But, there's a lot of misconceptions, the misremembering that you start to see within this. It's not exactly real. There isn't the detailed level of understanding as if you went and talked to people about social media and, the differences between Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, la-di-da, but that is what we're expecting to happen, in terms of the consciousness and understanding,
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Richard.
Hi, Nick.
Hello,
Is this
Richard.
really for big brands or for small brands? What are the barriers to entry? Are they high or low?
I think it's definitely for big brands. I think that's one of the things that can see really clearly. And if you look at the investments going in from the likes of, there's one of the other examples on that I was looking at earlier is around Tiffany's, for example. And there are huge investments going in, say, from Nike and Adidas right now. And I think that point around analog digital sort of experience, and virtual experience, and that being there being mechanisms to extend, let's say, take Glastonbury, right? You can't get your Glastonbury ticket, right? But there is a potential, rather than just watching it on the iPlayer or something like that in the future, to have an extension of that, so that you've got a virtual world component of it. Now, it's not going to be the same, because you're not going to be covered in mud unless, I guess, you go and sit in your garden and roll around on the floor at the same time. But it's, you really can see where some of these brands are thinking, and what that evolution could probably look like. I think that for smaller brands, it depends on what category you're in as to whether it is particularly relevant for you right now or not. But I think there is an imperative for all brands to be considering what relevance this has for them or not, because the not is still definitely possible.
Nick, obviously as a Roblox guru, should I be taking more interest in my daughter's Roblox and the offers she's getting of financial reward for her selling her properties on Roblox?
So I think yes, because of the point around the Wild West. I think that, one of the, and this is as a parent myself, it's like, you've got no idea what they're really doing when they've got their headset on and they're building some house and some chicken running around or whatever the hell it is that's going on. And, and now with the, lack of, governance, that really still does exist in this space. I think it is a place where, a duty of care, as it were, as a parent, is you really need to to be looking, because there's a lot of innocent nothing happening, but that just creates a space where there's a lot of non-innocent something that could happen. Yeah. I think they're not. It's not that. It won't all be just scamming. But that is one of the things that'll be there. Definitely lock down the passwords so they can't spend your money without you looking, because you don't want to be finding you living next to Snoop Dogg and you've got a large bill the next morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. I was sat there thinking, I need to let my 8-year-old go back onto Roblox, because in the future he could be making a lot of money and I can retire soon. I hope you've all got some food for thought there. We're going to take a short break now. We've got refreshments in the room next door in the presidential suite. Please do go and network. You've got enough conversation topics there to keep you going. And please come back for 11:30 for our second session. See you soon.